they've been suckered into it. They never did anything. They couldn't have done. They could hardly stand up, and they didn't have reek of alcohol. You know, when somebody's had a skinful for days and days and days, you know, they were obviously pissed out of their mind. They didn't even know where they were.
No.
So how strong are the IRA in the Cat A's?
Well, the Cat A's were, IRAs were at the Scrubs. Yeah, I crossed their path a few times.
I've heard they're quite strong because they're considered like a military.
Yeah, they wanted to have military status, you see. Well, I can understand it. I mean, I'm partly Irish. I've got Irish ancestors. I'm not unsympathetic with the cause, but blowing people up, I kind of draw a line at that, you know. But they were in the Scrubs, and they thought they were military. And I don't know how this happened. I got put in charge of their visits. You know, so when they came in, I had to sit in on their visits and make notes about what they were. You can imagine, yeah?
What were they talking about?
I don't think they're talking about what you might talk about, you know. I was anti-flow going on, you know, and all this. They weren't talking about plotting anything, you know, nothing like that. Just the usual banter that you would get in a family. But the fact that I'm sat there making notes, it was intimidating for them. And I tried to say to them, look, I said, I'm just doing my job, you know. I'm not doing this for fun, you know, and I'm not going to intimidate you. See, the thing you'll get with a lot of prison staff is that they're frightened stiff. That if they say anything, they're going to lose the pension or... I mean, I did a big article for The Guardian. What was it called? Loose Screws, it was called. Seriously. And at the end of it, I said, I have been formally cautioned and previously charged under the Official Secrets Act. And if it is an official secret, what's going on in our prisons, then I plead guilty. I'm telling you what's happening, you know.
Yeah.
It's the truth.
So a lot of guards are afraid to speak out then because of the fear of this Official Secrets Act.
Yeah, I mean, there is a scene in the documentary Strangeways at the start of it, the Screws thing, where Norman Brown, who is the #1 governor, is cautioning all the young prison officers who had just been recruited. And he's telling them that what happens in Strangeways stays in Strangeways. You do not discuss it. You don't talk to the press. You mustn't tell your family what's happening. Tell nobody what's happening. Otherwise, you'll be charged under the Official Secrets Act.
Do you have to sign any paper?
You have to sign. You signed under the Official Secrets Act. During the time that I was there, I told you that I'd previously decided that the Prison Officers Association was little more than a tool of management. In fact, it effectively was the management. So I decided we had to do something about that. And I had friends who were solicitors, and they helped me draft up the application to form an independent trade union, which we called the Prison Force Federation. And a number of staff, a lot of staff at Strangeways were supporting me for this because they too realised, you know, that they had no representation. And I offered them a system whereby we would have a union that was only for non-supervisory grade staff. And I went all around the country lecturing on this. And in fact, I came to Liverpool, and I was invited by the staff at Liverpool Prison to go and speak to them about why we needed an independent trade union. And believe this or not, the governor at Walton Jail and the chief officer called a staff parade on the morning that I was due to attend to give a speech in the local, they hired a hall for the evening, yeah.
Masonic sabotage.
They called a meeting, and they called all the staff, and they warned them. They said, in the event that any one of you attends this meeting tonight, being spoken to by Mr. Sutton, you will be expelled from the Prison Officers Association. And the Prison Officers Association is a closed shop at Walton Jail, so you won't be working here.
So they performed a witch hunt on you?
Yeah, well, they did that. And, you know, they'd had about 100 people who were going to attend. And I ended up with about 2. Yeah, I was interviewed on the radio, on BBC Radio Merseyside. I said, where were the staff? Where are these shrinking violets? Yeah, hiding away. Come on. They didn't dare to do it. I went to one to give a lecture at HMP Durham. And when I got to HMP Durham, I went to the function room where they were, because I was a bit late, but I was only about half an hour late. And when I got there were two blokes on the door, and they said, "What's your name?" I said, "Who are you?" "You know who we are." And it was two chief officers from HMP Durham who were standing at the gate, at the door to this function room, taking everybody's name. Taking the staff's name who went into this meeting that I was going to speak. And when I got in there was about half a dozen people. The bloke who organised it said he had over 150 ready to speak to me. But as soon as they saw the chief officers standing on the door taking their names, they disappeared. I mean, what kind of a carry-on is that?
It's the power of the POA and the Freemasons.
Yeah, definitely. That they had them terrified. And the problem was there was no way through it. In the end, believe this or not, the Home Office officials and the POA put out a notification that I was a member of Colonel Gaddafi's revolutionary army.
What?
And that I was here on his behalf to cause chaos in the British prison system. That's what I was going to be doing. That's what I mean, yeah.
So there was a conspiracy against you then?
Well, the conspiracy was the conspiracy, but it frightened all the staff. And I was called by the BBC to do a big interview, and I went and did a 6:30 at night interview, saying why we needed an independent trade union because the inmates were being abused, and this was in the system. That was their system. They abused the inmates. And they thought it was all right. It was run and condoned by the government through the POA. And when I went back in the next day, they charged me with, I don't know when it was under the disciplinary code. If you look at that Strangeways documentary, there's a section of it where the governor and the chief officer are sat together going through the rule book, deciding what they're going to charge me with. Now, the chief officer was a member of the Prison Officers Association. He is supposed to be in the same union as the staff, i.e. me. And there he is, sat down with the number one governor, preparing a charge against me. What happened? I got taken before a board, and they charged me with breaching governor's directions not to appear before the press or the media. And I was found guilty, and I was reduced in rank or whatever it was, and disbarred from applying for promotion for 7 years. And it was scare tactics, And I appealed against the judgment to the Secretary of State on the grounds that it was ultra vires, it was beyond their power to discipline me because I was the elected General Secretary of a trade union. And as I was the elected General Secretary of a trade union, acting to promote that union, I was protected under the trade union law. And the Secretary of State upheld my appeal and cancelled it, which meant that they weren't really going to get me because they weren't that smart. So that's when I started to get attacked.
What was the first attack?
First attack was an inmate one Christmas Day, and I can't understand why he did it, because I think, that the word got round, that something had to be done. Well, the various staff threatening me. One fella, we called him Big H, yeah? So I have literally forgotten his name, but he was called Big H. He was a hospital officer, senior officer. And he'd been drinking in the club. He came back onto the landings, and I was on the second landing, and he was on the first landing. And he started shouting abuse at me while I was unlocking the prisoners to get their ablutions done. When I get my hands on you, Sutton, I'm going to rip your head off, you little bastard, and all this, that, and the other. I said, you can't be serious, grow a brain. But he didn't stop, So what I did was, I got sheets of paper and I went round and took statements of all the inmates who'd witnessed this. Then I wrote my statement out and I went to see the governor. Norman Brown. I said, I want you to put these in my record of service. He said, what do you want this for? I said, well, you're employing a maniac who, in full view of everybody who's there to listen, is threatening to physically abuse me. So he happens to be about 6'5" and about 19 stone, and it's possible that he's got a chance of doing this. Said, so in the event that he does, I want it to be in my record of service that I have told you that this is a dangerous, drunken man who is intimidating and threatening me. He said, well, I can't do that. I said, just put it in my record of service if you don't mind. Get out of my office, you know. So didn't really get anywhere, but he never threatened me again. But it was Christmas Day, and I lived about 10 miles away from the prison, and I was in charge of the clinic, and with me was another hospital officer. It's a clinic on the Boston Allocation Centre unit in Strangeways, and I was in charge of the clinic, and we were both working it together. So as it came around to lunchtime, I said, listen, we had to split the lunch up, you know. I had an hour, he had an hour. I said, you can have my lunch. I said, I'll just sit here and read a book. You know, I've got a glass of wine, I'll be all right. And you can go and see your wife and family, because he only lives 2 miles up the road. Oh, he said, that's very nice of you. I said, it's all right. Take your time, come back when you're finished, you know. Couple of hours, you know, so he can have my lunch break as well as that. I said, I won't be saying anything, will I? So I got on with it. Anyway, it got to about 2 o'clock before he came back, and he'd left about 12. And when he came back, he looked really white, and I said, what's this? You got a face like a slapped ass, mate. What's the matter? And he was stunk of booze. He hadn't been home at all. He'd gone to the prison club, drank a vast amount of booze, lost all his money on slot machines and these things, and therefore he was in a very vile mood. He jumped over the table and grabbed hold of me and started to throttle me, strangle me. And in the clinic, we've got bottles of Largactil, all the tablets, we've got the syringes drawn up for the diabetics. If I'd started fighting back, we'd have smashed it to bits. I had to just roll with it, you know, and try and protect myself. And when I got myself free, because somebody came in and pulled him off, yeah, when I got myself free, I rang up the duty officer in charge of the prison and reported this. So they came down, they said, oh, well, we'll move him to another unit. I said, he's drunk. He just physically attacked me. And you're telling me you're going to move him somewhere else? Well, we've got to... I said, I tell you what, I'm going to the hospital. So I went to the hospital and I was off for about 10 days. He damaged my larynx. I couldn't eat for about a week.
Bloody hell.
That was one of the first ones.
What was the next one?
Well, I was subsequently, I was going on to the duty. I was actually in charge by this time because I'd passed all the promotion exams. And I was in charge of the psychiatric ward at Strangeways. You know, where they go to get, you see them at court say, remanded for psychiatric reports in custody. Well, that's where they go to. They go to a big ward, about 20 of them on there. And I was the officer in charge of that ward. So it was lunchtime, and it would be about, 20 to 1 in the afternoon. And I was going up to do the afternoon shift on the ward. And this senior officer started shouting at me. And I said, listen, leave it alone. I said, if you really want to be aggressive with me, charge me with some discipline offence and put me in front of the governor. Do not threaten me and abuse me. I said, because I'm not going to listen to this. And I just walked away and was going up the stairs, very steep stairs, because it was upstairs. As I got about halfway up, he ran up behind me and grabbed hold of the back of my tunic and started to drag me back down the stairs. Dragged me physically back down the stairs. So I took my left fist and right on the end of his snot box, took him from half the step to the bottom. And there was witnesses watching this. There was one of my colleagues at the bottom of the stairs and somebody else at the top, and they gave statements to say they'd seen what had happened. And they suspended me.
How cruel.
They suspended me. So I went, I said, I've had enough of this. And by this time, I'll be going to get psychologically, I'm getting paranoid, you know. What's going to happen to me next, you know? So I went to see my doctor and he put me on the sick and I never went back.
Never went back after that.
No, the Home Office sent me to see a psychiatrist. And the psychiatrist said, he said, I'll listen to what you've got to say, Mr. Sutton. He said, and I've come to the conclusion that you are perfectly sane, but Strangeways is absolutely mad. He said, and you're not to go back.
No.
So I never went back.
And how did you feel leaving it?
Well, don't forget, I joined to support my wife and family. I didn't want to just walk out and have no job. Well, that's basically what happened. So, but they give me a pension, you know. 37 years later, I'm still drawing the pension, and they're all mad.
So what do they think about you having a YouTube channel?
I'm not really asked them, have I?
Have you been contacted by anybody?
No. I'm waiting for it.
Official Secrets Act.
I'll tell them the same as I told The Guardian. If it's an offence to tell the truth, then I'm guilty.
Kudos to that. So what was life like once you came out of there?
I was all right, really. I've been running, you see. When I was about 30, I weighed about 15 stone. So I thought, I've got to do something about this. So I started running to lose weight, you see. And in the Strangeways, they had 2 physical training officers who were they call them PTIs, you know, physical training staff. Yeah. And they were runners. Yeah. So I went to see them. I said, I'm going to start running, you know. And they thought this was hilarious, you know. Yeah, start running. Yeah. I said, yeah, I'm going to do a marathon. They said, you'll kill yourself. You know. So I said, all right, well, I'm going to start running. So I got myself some running shoes. And I went out running with them one lunchtime. Well, they nearly killed me. Yeah, seriously, it was that hard. We ran from Strangeways up to a place called Boggart Hall Clough, which anybody knows the area of Manchester will know that is. Ran round there and back. Well, they ran there and back, and I think I walked the last bit. But I eventually did it because I did it every day. And it came to the marathon, which was being run in the August. This was about February. So it took me about 6 months to get to the point where I could run a marathon. And they were in it, these 2 training instructors.
Did you beat them?
I beat them, yeah.
Wow.
I went round in 3 hours, 20 minutes. And I don't know where they were, but they were certainly behind me. I ran past one of them. And after that, I got a T-shirt that said, faster, faster, come on, Barry, because one of them was called Barry, you see. So I used to go running with this on at lunchtime. Made me laugh, anyway. Yeah.
So with the Cat A's then, it's like in America, would that be the equivalent for Supermax? Is it Cat A?
Yeah, the category is everywhere they went in the prison, they had a book. You know, and the book had to be signed. I'll tell you a story about Cat A at the Scrubs. It was on C2 landing. And I saw this governor, a wing governor, come out of his office at the end of the wing, up onto C2 landing where I was working, at lunchtime when it's all locked down and everybody's gone for lunch. And he unlocked a Category A prisoner and took him out of the cell. And I went to said, this is a Category A prisoner, so you know he cannot be moved during the lunch hour, the lockdown in the prisons. I'm the governor of this wing. He said, I'll do what I want. So I contacted the principal officer who was in downstairs. He said, he's the governor, he can do what he wants. Really? So anyway, I saw this a couple of times. He was taking this Category A out at lunchtime into his office. Really? So one day I was working in the censor's office and a letter came in for this inmate who was a notorious armed robber serving 18 years for shotgun robberies in London. And the letter was from the House of Lords, and it was from some Lord such a body, I don't know who it was, I forget now. But it said, how wonderful to hear from you again. I trust that they're taking care of you at Wormwood Scrubs. I will certainly be coming to visit you soon, and I will send you my best regards. Yours sincerely, lots of love, whatever his name was, the House of Lords. So the only way that a prisoner can receive a letter in prison is in response to a letter that they've sent out. You can't write in to say Charles Bronson and he'll get it. He won't get it. It has to be a letter that he's sent to you, so you can't directly contact any inmate. So for this member of the House of Lords to actually write in and thank this prisoner for his letter meant that a letter had gone out, except he had a letter sheet and there was no nomination on there, no record of any letter being sent.
How bizarre.
So I wrote a report about this and took all the evidence. I went to see the chief officer about that. Oh, well, he said it's just probably something or other. I said, no, it's not. This is serious. So I went to see the inmate. I said, right, who's smuggling your letters out? He said, what do you mean smuggling letters? I said, you've got a letter here from Lord Suchabody. I said, you wrote to him. Yeah, he did. I said, well, it didn't go through the censor's office because we notify everything. Who took it out for you? He said, I can't tell you that. I said, you are about to tell me that. So I said, well, if you insist, it was the Wing Governor. I said, well, why would the Wing Governor want to take letters out for you? He says, well, you know, when you've seen me going into his office at lunchtime. I said, yeah. He said, and you complain. He said, what I have to do is, he said, he bends over the desk and I service him, you see, at lunchtime. He said, and in return, he gives me whiskey and takes my letters out. And I said, does he really? So, seriously. So I wrote a report on this. I had a way of doing things, you see. I thought if you do it formally, you know, do it properly, then you're doing your job. So I went to see the number one chief officer at Wormwood Scrubs, gave him my report, gave him the evidence, all the rest of it, said, I've previously mentioned this to you, there's the evidence, that's what's been happening. And he said, who's given you the authority to investigate senior members of staff? So I had a warrant card, you know, and it says on it, whilst acting as a prison officer, you have all the authority of a police constable. I said, that's my authority. I'm doing my job. Get out of my office. So I never thought, well, I've done my job, you know. That's what I had to do. I'd done my job. So I was on the landing and about 4 or 5 inmates, one after the other, coming up to me saying, what the hell have you been doing? I said, doing anything, you know. Because I used to get on with them all right, you know. And they said, no, there's 2 senior police officers downstairs in the offices calling people up and asking them questions about you. What? Well, they were trying to stitch me up. Trying to get some kind of...
Giving it some of that.
Yeah. Seriously. I think it probably was. But, I mean, that's how dangerous it was. If they could have stitched me up, they would have done it properly. That wasn't the only one. On Saturday morning, it would be about 10:30, something like that in the morning, and the inmates from C Wing had gone out on exercise, onto the exercise yard. And I was left in charge of the first landing. And as I was walking down the landing, I looked into a cell that was open, and in there was an inmate dressed in choir boy's vestments, you know, dressed as a choir boy. So obviously he's not allowed to be dressed as a choir boy. He wears prison clothing. So I opened the door and said, come on, why are you dressed like this? Take it off.
Fantasy.
He said, I can't tell you. I said, Joe, you're going to tell me? Sit down on this bed here and tell. And he started crying. I said, oh, come on now. It can't be that bad. He said, it's the chaplain. He said, he comes round while everybody's on exercise and I have to get down on my hands and knees dressed as a choir boy and fillet him, which is a polite way of saying sucking his dick, you know. But that's what he was doing. So I said, right, take that cast off, put it into his pillowcase, and I wrote a statement out, got him to sign the statement. I wrote my statement out. Once again, went to see the chief officer. Another case of, how dare you investigate senior members of the staff? Get out of my office. Seriously, yeah. I mean, they were condoning it. It just beggars belief. Seriously.
Anything at this level before. This is just mind.
You've never heard anything like this before. It's going on all the time. In prisons up and down the country, the people are abusing their authority and manipulating and abusing inmates. Seriously. And the higher up in the authority are, the more difficult it is to deal with them. Because if somebody on the ground floor reports it, all hell breaks loose. And, of course, they couldn't stitch me up because, I don't know, they just didn't have a plot, But they certainly made my life misery.
Attacks.
Well, the only thing, when I went this is what really made me angry. I joined the prison service, a career, yeah? I believed mistakenly that it could be a career. I did. I didn't join to do anything else. I joined to earn a wage and have a proper pension at the end of it so I could look after my wife, yeah? And seriously, I got to Wormwood Scrubs and I've been there about 4 months, 5 months, and I was applying for a prison quarter. And they kept saying, oh, no, you'll not get one now. There's no prison quarters, So I thought, well, I'll rent a flat. I didn't want to be parting from my wife. She was at Manchester and I was in London. You can't do that. So I tried to rent a flat, but all my wages, the whole lot, wouldn't rent a flat in London. This was in 1975. So I was really angry at this. They were supposed to provide me with somewhere to live. They'd moved me from Manchester to Wormwood Scrubs. So I applied. I went to see the POA, and they said, oh, no, it took me 18 months to get a quarter. You'll just have to wait. I said, you must be joking. So I was angry at this. So one of the staff I knew on my wing, his father was the chief officer in charge of the works unit, the works department. They used to have a works department. They don't know. So I said, ask him how many quarters there are that are vacant at the Scrubs, empty. And it turned out, he came back to me a couple of days later, he said that there were 16 quarters empty. So I went to see the POA, and I said, what's this about 16 quarters empty? And I'm waiting, to be allocated a quarter. And I've been here 4 months, and my wife's in Manchester. Oh, no, they said, we hold them quarters back in case we get any senior officers posted in from other prisons.
They're expecting 16.
Yeah, well, I don't know what they were expecting. but so this really infuriated me. And this is the POA telling me this, So there were a number of prison officers at the Scrubs who were waiting for quarters. Their wives were all over the place. So I got a list and I put my name at the top of it. And I went round their staff and I said, we're going to go and see the governor, yeah? I said, I'll go and see the governor, but I want a petition to make them release these empty quarters, yeah? So I wrote it at the top. I went to see the governor. Didn't ask the chief officer, just went to see the governor. And I gave him this petition. I said, he said, well, what do you want me to do with that? I said, I want a quarter. I said, because if I don't get a quarter at the next month, I said, me and all these officers here will be at the front of your prison with placards, and you can tell the press, because they'll be there, you can tell the TV how you don't allocate quarters despite what you're contracted to do. Get out of my office. So anyway, next month I got a quarter. I was allocated a quarter. Yeah, seriously. And these other staff came to see me and they said, how come you've got a quarter and we haven't? So what do we do? I said, all you've got to do is get a sheet of paper, put your name at the top, go and see the governor and tell him you're going to demonstrate outside his prison. Yeah, well, they wouldn't do that, would they? They didn't have the nerve to do it. But, I mean, that wasn't the end of it. Believe this or not, I was there in the quarter. We moved in, me and my wife, and it would be about 9:30 at night. I'd been on nights, or a late shift, And I got into the quarter and I could hear all this shouting and screaming down. So I said to my wife, what's all that going on here? She said, oh, it's a gang of louts. They come round and they're shouting. They were shouting up at the houses, the blocks of flats. Shouting up, come on, missus, we know your husband's away. We're going to come up there and give you one, I said, how long has this been going on? She says, oh, it happens on a regular basis. I said, right. So I had a little dog. I put the dog on a lead and I went down to see him. I said, you can't hang around here, you know. These are prison quarters. So you don't live here. Just go and play somewhere else. They were about 17, 18. They weren't kids, you know, and they were big lads. And so they said, oh, piss off. And the biggest one said, do you know who I am? And I had an idea who he was. He was the eldest son of the chairman of the POA. So I said, I'll go and see your father. So I went to see him at his home the following day, knocked on his door. I said, I want to see you about your son. I said, come in. And I told him, I said, you can't have him going around the quarters at night shouting abuse at people who live there. I said, and it isn't just that. I said, I believe that they've been urinating into children's prams, you know, intimidating the people who live there. I said, now, I would like you to tell your son to stop. I said, because there's going to be trouble if he doesn't. And, I mean, you'd think that, you know, you'd say, well, thank you for telling me, not him. He said, in the event that you put a hand on my son, he said, I'll see you in court. I said, are you joking? I said, there's going to be trouble. He can't keep on like that. Anyway, it subsequently transpired that one day his son and two other louts were on the stairs going up to my flat. I said, come on, lad, shift, I need to get up the stairs. Climb over us, you bastard, you know. Well, you know what you've been saying. So I tried to climb over and one of them kicked me in the eye. And it really hurt my eye, all swollen up and bleeding, you know. So I went to the police and I asked to see the duty inspector and I made a report about this. And he said, I said, I want to see the duty inspector. And I did see the duty inspector. And I made a complaint. He said, I've got a word of caution for you. He said, in the event that you lay your hands on any of these lads, he said, I will personally arrest you. And I said to this police inspector, you and I are going to meet again. About a month or two later, it was the cup final. Manchester United in the cup final. And me and one of the other officers, who was a friend of mine, we decided when we'd finished our shift on the Saturday afternoon to go for a beer at a local bar. So we walked down there, and as we started walking down, this gang of louts started walking behind us, shouting abuse. So I said to my friend, I said, well, just forget about it, you know, just leave them to it, you know, they go away. So we went into the bar, and I was stood at the end of the bar, and these gang came in, 3 big lads, and they had glasses in their hands, and they said, right, Sutton, we're going to kill you now. And they got about here, and I just flattened a lot of them. Bang, bang, bang. As you would, you know, because I knew what I'm doing, you see. Anyway, they fall on the floor. The ambulance came, took the big one away, the son of the POA officer, yeah, took him away in an ambulance. Apparently I'd fractured his skull. I didn't know. I was defending myself, you know. The police came and charged me. Seriously. I said to the police, 3 big men come in, threaten to kill me, and I defend myself. You charge me? Yeah, so anyway, I ended up at Knightsbridge Crown Court. You can imagine, I've joined this job to earn a living. I'm at Knightsbridge Crown Court. Yeah. And the dock officers, when I was in the dock on the second day after giving evidence and all that, the dock officers said to me, you see them 2 men there at the front? I said, yeah, I see them. They're there to take you to prison. You're going to an open prison. I said, do you think so? They said, oh, yeah, you're going to get guilty. Anyway, it took the jury about 10 minutes. I didn't even have time to drink my cup of tea. Yeah, not guilty. But imagine having to go through that. My poor wife.
Did you have to testify on your behalf?
My wife couldn't testify on my behalf because she was at home.
Or did you testify on your behalf?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
One of the questions was, the guy prosecuting said, I'll put it to you, Mr. Sutton, that you are an expert in self-defence. I said, I'll put it to you that you're right. Self-defence. I said, and I am entitled to defend myself. That's right, isn't it?
That's brilliant.
Yeah.
I mean, I think the argument was I'd defended myself a little bit too well.
Excessive force.
But how do I know if somebody's coming at me with a glass and they've got 2 big lads? These were 6'2" lads. I'm about 5'8", you know. Anyway, that was the end of that. You'd think that would be the end of that.
No?
You would. No, it wasn't the end of that.
Oh.
This lad thought that he was a tough guy. He was obviously the local heavy, you know. So he was waiting for me one day. And when I came up the stairs to go to he chased me, ran after me. And somehow he managed to catch me up, you know. Don't know how he did that, but he caught me up. And I gave him the best hiding a boy's had for a long time. We were halfway through this, and he starts screaming, I've had enough, I've had enough. I said, shut the fuck up, I haven't started yet. I mean, I know it shouldn't be done, but what can I do? I had to teach him a lesson. And what do you think happened then?
Another case?
Back in court?
Back to the courts. Yeah. Only this time, I managed to get a cross summons against him and charged him with assault because he chased me. He said, how I was living. I'm entitled to go as far as my doorstep, and I don't have to go over my doorstep. I can protect. So that's what I did. And I was found not guilty, and he was found guilty.
Great.
Yeah.
So he's got himself a criminal record.
Good.
And I got sent for by the Home Office to go to Stag Place, I think it was, and the regional director of the South East Prison Service sent for me into his office. Big office, nice office. Yeah, and at the back of him there was a map with all these maps pins on. And he said to me, your name's Sutton? I said, yes, it is, sir. He said, you see that map? He said, I see it, yeah. He said, all those flags on there, on that map, they're prisons. Pick one, he said, because you're not working at the Scrubs. So I said, I'll go to Strangeways at Manchester. He said, right, get out. That was the end of it. Threw me out. That's how I got back to Strangeways.
How different was Strangeways from the...
Were you treated any better?
When I got back to Strangeways, I got to the gate, and the officer on the gate, I knew him, and he said, what the hell have you been doing? He said, the prison's full of stories about you. He said, I said, well, you've got to stand up for yourself, haven't you?
100%.
I couldn't help it. What can I do?
So do you have a military background that you had training?
Yeah, I was in the army for 5 years, and I was the regimental middleweight boxing champion, and fought for the BAOR title. And
Do you feel that carried you through the years?
well, it taught me how to hit somebody. You know, because if you hit somebody, most people will just do a little thing like that, but that's not going to get you anywhere. That's going to tittle them. But if you do it properly, they go out. And I knew how to do it properly, you see.
So during those 5 years in the military, what did you do?
I started off in the Royal Artillery. I joined the Royal Artillery. See, the story behind that, which is in my first book called Screwed Up, which is available on Amazon, folks. Yeah, I started off and I was working in the factories. Now, I could see that the factories weren't going anywhere. Absolutely. It was because we were using equipment that was built in the 1940s, 1950s, and this is the late 60s. So I thought, I've got to get out of this. So I joined the army, and I went to see the army, and the army said, great, you come in, you've passed the test, you can go in the Royal Artillery. Great, I'll do that. Because my idea was the artillery, they ride about on trucks, you know. You go in the infantry, you run about. So anyway, so I did that. And he said, but you've got to take your papers and you get your parents to sign, because I was 18. And at that time, the age of majority was 21. So I went back to my parents, and my dad said, you're not joining the army. We're not signing your papers. I said, I can't continue working in the mills. You know, it's just dispiriting. It's not going anywhere, you know. So he said, well, we're not signing. So I went back to the army and said, I can't go through with this. They said, well, there is a way. They said, you can apply to the government to be made a ward of state. He said, you've got to go before the magistrates and ask them to assume the authority of your parents, and you'll be made a ward of state, and the magistrate will sign your documents and you're in the army. Let's do it. Off to the magistrates. And on the Bible, swore them, and I was in the army. When I went home, they went absolutely bloody wild. You can't join the army. I said, I've got the whale warrant here. I'm off. And I went off and joined the army, yeah. And it was all right.
So what funny army stories have you got?
Oh, too many. I mean, there's a lot of them. But I joined the army and, listen, the army's bullies. There's a lot of bullies, you know. And there was one bully, he was a sergeant who was in charge of our troop. And he was the usual industrial-sized giant, you know, 6'4", big barrel chest, you know, lift, all that nonsense, you know. So I went to bed at about 10 o'clock at night. And I'm asleep in bed. And all of a sudden, I'm on the floor. Somebody's thrown me out of bed. And I can hear all this laughing above me. And I saw this. It was just somebody miles down here on the floor. So standing over me, laughing away. So all I knew was he got his boots there, and I put my hand under his trouser bottoms and whipped his feet away, whipped his feet from under him, and this giant sergeant came flying down, bang, on the floor. So he hit the floor with an almighty crack. I got all of the top of his head, and I was just about to sink my elbow right into his forehead, which would have terminated the bastard. When the two NCOs who had been on the piss with him grabbed hold of me, no, don't do it. You know, they carried him out. They carried him out. And the next day they called me up and said, have you thought about joining Special Forces? They couldn't charge me, could they? No. Hey, imagine going that before the colonel. Well, I threw him out of bed and he'd put me out of him. He wouldn't do it like he said. I thought that was funny. Anyway, so from there I went to the parachute regiment. Did the parachute course. You must have talked to people who've done this.
Oh, yeah, I've had a few paras on, yeah.
Yeah, it's murder.
How so?
Well, you never stop running. I mean, you try running 20 miles with a 70-pound pack on your back.
All right.
Yeah, and carrying, they had a stretcher, and it's got concrete blocks on. You got to run with that up and down the Brecon Beacons and all that. You really go through it, you know. And then they had a thing called the Trainasium. You can look at it up on YouTube, the Trainasium. But when I did it in the 60s, they didn't have any safety nets or nothing like that. In the 60s, it was real stuff. And you go up about 25, 30 foot in the air, and you've got to balance on these parallel bars, shout your name, rank, and number down to the people below, PTIs below. Bend over, touch your toes, hold your arms up, and then you've got to jump off the top onto a pole and get yourself down to the bottom. So I did all this. I jumped off, got hold of the pole, and I was so relieved to get hold of the pole. I failed to grip it. Whoosh, straight down to the bottom. I did was all right, you know, I landed okay, but I could have really killed myself. It was that far down, yeah. And the thing was, the parachute regiments, it's still the same old army bullshit. We did the milling, you know. And I'm only about 5'8", but I weighed about 12 stone. I was solid. And they did you by height, you know. So the guy who was the same height as me weighed about 9 stone. So they said, oh, we can't do that. So there was a guy on the course, it was a military policeman who was the usual giant, you know. I said, why don't you ask him if he'll do it? So they said, you know, because he'd already done his milling, you know. I said, would you do it again? Yeah, no problem at all. I gave him a right smack. It took me about 10 seconds to flatten the bastard. Out. And then the physical training instructors who were judging you on this, I said, what do you reckon, 10 out of 10? Anyway, I was in the block, and these two, I don't know who the hell they were, came in and they said, would anybody play rugby this Saturday for us, you know? So I said, I'll play scrum half, that's all I can play, you know, it's the only position I know, scrum half, you know? So they said, all right, well, we'll give you some training. Get yourself down to the quartermaster's store, get a box of Vim and come back and clean all the showers. I said, no, if you want people to play rugby, I'll do that. If you want people to clean the baths, then ask. The answer's no. Oh, I'm a potential officer, I'm telling you to do it. I said, I'll take your potential officer's arse and kick it right through the fucking door. And I piss off. Anyway, the next morning I got called up by the colonel in charge of the course. Returned to unit. What for? I passed all the course. I'd done all that. But they said, oh no, we're not having that kind of action here. Potential officer, my arse.
Did you get dispatched anywhere around the world?
Yeah, I was in Libya in 1969, believe it or not. That might be where they got the idea that I was with Colonel Gaddafi, you see.
Maybe.
Yeah, but when Colonel Gaddafi took over Libya in 69, I was there. We were at a place called RAF El Adam, was the base, but we were out in the middle of the Sahara Desert. And we were there one day, and the sergeant major came back walking out of the desert into the camp. We said, well, where's your Land Rover? He said, no, the Revolutionary Army have just stopped me, taken my Land Rover, taken my weapons, and said, get back in and tell us to get out of Libya. Well, we couldn't get out of Libya because they wouldn't allow any flights in. And we were going on a boat. We were in the middle of the Sahara Desert for about 6 months.
Wow.
6 months. And they put me in charge of a unit that was guarding the armory, all the weapons, that we still had weapons, yeah? And so we're out there, and the Libyan Revolutionary Army used to get Land Rovers, their Land Rovers, and surround us and put the lights on. And we were marching around, so we got strict instructions, do not open fire, yeah? No, you mustn't fire back. They were shooting rounds over our heads. It was a little bit scary. So I said to the soldiers, I said, listen, I've had enough of this. I said, we're in the spotlight, so we'll give them a show. I said, what do you mean? I said, well, do you know the song from Oliver was a musical at the time? I said, we'll go out there and sing them a song. So we practiced this, and then we went out there singing, consider yourself. Oh, dancing up and down like that, like a Hollywood show. And all these Arabs, looking at us like that. We got the lights on us. Well, they put us on stage, so we give them a show. I thought that was funny. But the captain who was in charge of the whole thing, he came running out, you maniacs, what do you think you're doing? I said, well, we're entertaining them,
How did you keep supplies up then if you're out there for 6 months?
I don't know. Well, it was the RAF was an RAF base. So they had supplies in the base. But it was terrible. I got dysentery in the dysentery. Listen, I was in a dysentery and they hospitalised me. It was that bad.
What's the symptoms of dysentery?
Dysentery, it's a disease of your intestines, in your stomach. And there was an infection there, and I couldn't water straight in, straight out the other end. Terrible. So they put me in hospital, yeah, and they put me on a dehydrated thing and all that. And there was you know what the Quaranks are, the Queen Alexandra Royal Army Nursing Corps? Well, it's like nurses, but they were in the army, And the matron was a captain, yeah. And she used to come in and say, right, sit up to attention in bed. I said, I'm ill, I'm not well, that's why I'm here, Not on parade, I'm ill. You don't insult me, I'm a captain, this, that, the other. You maniac, you silly bitch. Now, one night, I'd been in there about 3 days, and I was slowly getting a little bit better. And they brought a drunk in from the logistics corps, and he was a giant Irishman. Must have been about 6'3", huge, great fella, And the MPs brought him in because he was drunk and incapable. And they put him to bed in the ward that I was in. The MPs stripped him off and covered him up, except about 5 o'clock in the morning, he's got his arms over both sides of the bed, his head right back, his feet hanging off the bottom. He was a giant, He's lied there, and he'd only covered it with a sheet, except he started to get an enormous erection. And he'd got no clothes on. So I got out of bed and pulled the covers off him. Yeah? Because every morning this Quarank, this captain, used to come in. So I'm in bed waiting for this nurse to come in. She walked in, and this guy's lay there snoring his head off with a giant hard on. And she took one look at it. She knew I'd threw the cover over him, yeah. About 10:30, I got discharged. I even got thrown out there bloody hospital. It made me laugh. Yeah, strange stories.
Oh.
So we're getting near the end, John. And are there any stories that you feel that we've perhaps missed out that you would like to tell us today?
Well, there's a lot of it. I mean, going into it about people who thought they were notorious, people like the Black Panther.
The Black Panther.
You remember that? His name was David Nielsen, I believe it was. He'd murdered this girl, Leslie Downey, I think her name was, and he'd strung her up. And he was blackmailing the family to get the money, you know. Otherwise, I'll murder your daughter, but she'd already been dead. And he'd done a few. He'd done about 4, I think. And he thought he was a tough guy. He was in D1 at Strangeways. I went to see him of a morning, you know, to just check on him. And he would be doing press-ups, sit-ups, step-ups, rolling on the spot. This is first thing in the morning. Come back at lunchtime, same thing. Evening. Never stopped. All day. No stopping. I'll tell you a little bit next time, if there is a next time, about the exploits on D1, about staff urinating into the soup, and you know, if you really want to know.
Yeah, we do.
Yeah, I'll do that another time.
Did people mess with the Panther?
He was about 5'6", you know. If he really wanted it, he'd have got the hammering of his life. I never saw anybody win down Strangeways. I saw some big bastards. None of them won.
Did you ever have to patrol the sex offender areas?
Oh, yeah, I did all that.
Is that a lot different from the general population?
Yeah, easy, that. Just unlock them. Then when you want them to go back in, you just say, "Get in yourselves, bow!" And they go and lock themselves up, you know, just because if they don't, you know, somebody might get them, might they?
Did you ever come across them getting got?
Oh, yeah. I mean, Ian Brady got scolded at the scrubs. They dragged him into a recess and poured boiling water over him. He didn't like that, you know. He objected to that.
Was that the water with the sugar in it?
I don't know if they did that. I think it just was boiling water. It seems to be a fairly new invention, but they're doing sugar, boiling water with sugar to stick to you, and boiling fat, you know, boiling the butter up and throwing that over them. Prison can be quite a violent place.
Yeah. All right, there you have it then. We've got a little tidbits for next time. If we do a part 2, please let us know in the comments. Would you like to see more of John Sutton? And don't forget, he is a prolific best-selling author. It's not all about psychic pets, you know. We've got Psychic Screw. Indeed. We've got Screwed Up. Was it the other one?
Screwed Up, yeah, that's the
Screwed
other
Up. And what else have you got in the Screw series?
I'm working on the next one.
Yeah. And if you want to listen to his fabulous CD.
Oh, yeah. You can look that up on YouTube. Two Hat John with the clap. Not for the faint-hearted.
It's got parental advisory on it, so yeah.
Yeah, it has.
Big stuff.
So I'd recommend people go to John's YouTube channel. He doesn't hold back, like you've heard today. It's no nonsense, but he's got a unique way about him that gets things done, and we salute him for that. So
definitely.
Thanks for coming on, John.
Today.
Cheers.
Thank you.
Brilliant. Yes, and he's got the hardest handshake of any of the guests.